For many of us, perhaps for you, I know for me, you have seen examples where churches maybe took advantage of money, right? They didn't prioritize it well. They didn't spend it how you thought they should. The pastor drove a car that was a little too nice. You didn't want to give to the church because you didn't really trust where it was going. Maybe you've been burned by the church and you feel like I went to the church all the time and they just talked about money over and over again. And so let's not do that. Let's not talk about money. Hopefully, this point, some of you are newer than others and you're maybe still learning and working out what I feel about the church. You know, we as Meadows Church haven't done a series on giving. I actually haven't preached a sermon on giving, on tithing. Now, I've mentioned it most every Sunday at the end of our service, and many of you do give and tithe or making that next step, considering that. But I would just ask you today, whatever giving baggage that you have right with you, that you've brought from past experiences that may have been poor, whatever baggage you have, I just want to ask politely if you would just try to leave that behind. Try to set that down and ask Jesus to speak to you today that you might be willing to rethink, right? Which is that word repent. Rethink money, finances, giving, generosity, based upon what Jesus has to say. Because he has quite a bit to say about generosity. And so today as we jump into chapter 6, we're going to see chapter 6, 1 through 4. Then we're going to skip over a section and move ahead to chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. And so, yes, it's two sections. There'll be a section in the middle that we won't get to today. That'll be for next week as he talks about prayer. But again, Jesus does set us up with where we are going in terms of generosity. So Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. I'm going to just read 1 and 2 as we begin. Again, all these are Jesus' words. Jesus says, beware of, so right there, it's like, let me listen to what Jesus says. If he says beware, he's like, be aware, be on the lookout. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, he gives an example. Therefore, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. Let me stop there. Jesus, all throughout the Sermon on the Mount, we've been wrestling with it each Sunday, gives us the point of the rule of the law. Here's what it says, yet here's actually the purpose of it. Here is the heart behind it, because what Jesus really cares about is our hearts. You've heard me say this many times, and I'm going to continue to say it, because ultimately it's not about us checking off the rules, checking off the boxes that we have done something. Rather, it's about the condition of our heart. What does our heart say? And Jesus says, beware of practicing your good deeds, your righteous deeds, in front of others for them to see. Right? These are people that it's like, hey, I'm going to do some great things, but I'm going to make sure that everyone knows about it. Everyone can see me. I'm going to give to the person, but I'm going to take that picture and put that on social media to celebrate so that people can see how good I am, how great I am, how generous I am, or how righteous I am. Jesus is like, hey, it's not about that. And as he's talking to this crowd, there's no doubt Pharisees that are there listening, and the Pharisees is who we referenced. Those that want to make a show of, look how good I am. Look how great I am. Look how much I'm helping others. Look how much I'm giving to them. Right? They do it in the synagogues and in the streets. Right? The synagogues, think of it as like our church. But they do it for people to see. And Jesus says, no. It's not about that. It's about your heart. The challenging thing here is what Jesus says. He talks about a reward. We're going to talk about this reward in a minute. He says, those of you that give for the wrong reason, you have already received your reward. But those that give for the right reasons will receive a reward from their Father who is in heaven. So the challenging things for us is what Jesus says. He says, even those who do give to the needy. So it's like even those who do check off the box, did that, checked off the box of giving. Even those that do give, Jesus says, will not receive a reward from their Father who is in heaven. So again, it's reiterating the point. It's not just about checking off the box. It's not just about the act of what you're doing of following the rule, right? The law says to be generous, and they're going to be generous. But if their heart is not in it, if they do it only to be seen, then it's not the heart that has been changed. Right? We can all think of the example of the person, that needs help, that we've seen maybe on the side of the road, at the gas station, at the intersection, wherever it may be. And when we give to this person, is it more about us actually helping them, right? The condition of our heart. Is it about us actually helping them, and what is the next step that they need in their life that I might help them? Or is it more about people seeing me? More about people noticing me? Do I need to take the picture of it to post on social media for others to see? And now what's interesting here is that we do live in a little bit of this tension, because Jesus says here about not practicing your righteousness before others that they might see you. Yet elsewhere it says, right, let your light shine before men, before others, that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. And so the tension there, well, Lord, do I do it in private and in quiet place, in the secret place, or do I do it for others to see? And this is where it's like, no, there's no right or wrong answer on the two. What's right is the condition of your heart. If you're legitimately wanting someone to see that you might help inspire and lead them to come to know who Jesus is, then again, that's what you know to be true in your heart. Right? What we do on the outside is what people can just look and see, and they may not really know our inner motives, right? Our inner self, our heart. This is what Jesus, in fact, really cares about. So Jesus, when he says, hey, you won't receive a reward if you do it for the wrong reasons, and you will if you do it for the right reasons. What I want us to see, which is important, is not that Jesus is deciding who gets the reward. Again, we're going to talk about the reward in a second. It's not like you gave to the person for the right reason, so you get reward. And you gave, and I don't think that was the right reason, so no reward for you. Yes, no, yes, no. It's not Jesus deciding what the principle is. What's true is that our heart, right, the condition of our heart, actually reveals what the reward will be. See, the way Jesus says it, those who give for the wrong reasons, they have already received their reward, is what Jesus says. What does he mean? Well, if my motives, my intentions were just to be noticed and to be seen and like, hey, y'all, look at me, look how good I am. If that was in fact my motive, then that's my reward. Yeah, when I take the picture and post it and I get 100 likes and people are like, man, you're so great and awesome and great job for giving. If that was what I really wanted, then I've received my reward, because that's the reward that I actually desire. Jesus isn't saying I'm picking and choosing what reward you get. He's saying the reward is what in fact your heart really wanted. This is the challenge that Jesus gives us. He goes on in verses 3 and 4 to say this. But when you give to the needy, he continues the illustration. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and that your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Giving is done because this is the Jesus way. As you walk through the path of life, give to those on your right, give to those on your left. The point is not that you let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. This is the way Jesus is to say, it's not about the show. It's not about, hey, look at me. He even says to give in secret, right? What does this mean, to give in secret? We're going to see this a few more times throughout the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says to do something in secret or in the secret place. Therefore, your Father who is in secret will reward you. The secret place is within. It's the us, it's the you, it's the me that only I know, only you know. The secret place is within your heart, that knows the true motives, that knows the true reasons of why you do something. And it's what Jesus, again, cares about. It's the motives of your heart. It's the things within, not the outward expressions that can be fake. Again, you can come all day and pretend to be righteous or to just do righteous things for the sake of someone noticing you. This is a tough message from Jesus. We can pretend all day in front of people. I'm going to say the right things. I'm going to do the right things over here. I'm going to check off all the boxes of what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm going to attend church every week, and I'm going to serve on a team. And hopefully all of these things are indicators of a heart that has been changed. But Jesus knows, because he sees it with the Pharisees, it can also just be something done for others to see. Right? Maybe right now it's like it's a wrestling match in your head of like, man, am I doing these things for the right reasons? Do I really just want someone to see me? Or has my heart really been changed, made pure, that I might follow Jesus down his path and give generously to those that need it? This is the example that he gives. It might be better for us to understand it in this way. The secret place reveals your true intentions. So for me, I've been on a journey for many years of wanting to be healthy. And I've been healthy sometimes, and sometimes I haven't. I lost a lot of weight before we got married because I didn't want to look too fat in my wedding pictures, and gained some of that back and lost some of it. And I'm one who, my wife doesn't ever have to worry about it. She's skinny and beautiful all the time, but yet she married a chubby guy, which is me. And so I feel like if I go to the gym and work out hard, which I do 5 days a week, if I get big enough up here, right, that maybe down here will look smaller, right? That's like science, right? Nonetheless, it's a journey that I'm on, so we're going to use me as an example right now. Now, another big thing that goes along, obviously, with working out and exercise is your diet, which is the hard part, right? Abs are made in the kitchen. Amen? It's hard to eat healthy. And yet, if I say, hey, I want to get healthy. I want to be healthy. You know what's in fact a little easier for me to do? When someone invites me to lunch, invites me out to dinner, and I'm with someone, it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to get the salad. Light dressing. Just get the water to drink. Everybody else is going to get the dessert. I'm like, no, not for me, not the dessert. And they're going to look at me and be like, man, wow, that guy is on it. He is being healthy. It's in fact easy to do that when people are looking at you. It's like, hey, I'm going to be healthy. And then whenever you're around people, it's like, I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to act healthy. I'm going to talk about that time I went for a jog. And maybe it was a few years ago, but I'm going to just act like it was, yesterday. But in the secret place, when no one's looking, when I come home and I close the doors, if I just pull out the Oreos and crush some Oreos at night before bed, or eat ice cream, or break all of the rules that I have been doing before people, but now when I'm alone, I break all the rules, my intentions are in fact revealed. In the secret place, the real place of what my intentions are, of what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to go at and be healthy, I really didn't want to be healthy. In fact, deep down, I actually didn't want to be healthy. I just really wanted, it'd be great to be healthy, but I kind of wanted just people to know and think that I'm trying to be healthy. And it was about the show, and I'm going to do it for them, but when I'm by myself, if I cheat at that point, right, that's where it's just challenging me. That's where it's messing up my own convictions. If I'm cheating when I'm by myself, then the real me comes out in those moments. This is what's true of what Jesus is saying. He says, don't give for people to see, give in the secret place. The motives that you give are not though that others might see you. And again, this illustration is giving, but Jesus is talking about our righteousness. He's talking about our good deeds. Do these things because they're the right way to do them. Walk the path of Jesus because it's the way that leads to wholeness of life. And he concludes that verse by saying, and your Father who sees you in secret will reward you. So really, what is this reward that we've been talking about? The reward is that we're following the Jesus way. That is, in fact, the way God designed us to live as humans. Back to the salt and light sermon. And this is God's design for us, that we would be whole and complete. I say this often as a reminder, and I don't want us to forget, God is not out to get you. God is not out looking to punish you. God desires your and my wholeness. Healthy relationships, healthy boundaries, right? A healthy life full of shalom, peace. This is what God desires for us. And the reward when we follow the Jesus way is in fact being in line with how God designed us to be, how he created us to live. This was his purpose and his plan. This is what Jesus is teaching. And then he takes our illustration a little further. So let's flip ahead now to Matthew chapter 6, and we'll skip over to verse 19. Jesus says this. I'm going to read it all the way through, and we'll go back through and see what Jesus has to teach us. Jesus says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Verse 24, no one can serve two masters, for he will either hate the one and love the other, or will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Jesus is laying it down. Verse 24 at the end there. You cannot serve God and money. So Jesus starts off by saying, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. So what are treasures on earth? What are treasures on earth? It's actually one of the more obvious answers here. It's possessions. It's the things that we acquire, the stuff we want to buy, whether it's a nice house or a nice car or nice clothes or nice shoes or a nice purse or whatever it is that you like to collect or buy. It's the possessions of this world. That we spend all of our time and energy and effort to acquire more of these things, whatever it may be. And Jesus says, do not lay up for yourselves. Therefore, do not pander after, do not go after, do not devote all of your time and attention and effort to gain these possessions, these earthly possessions. Because Jesus says, moth and rust destroy. Now, when do we see moths and rust with things? It's when they get old, when they wear out. Now, I know there's like scientific reasons of why rust shows up. Yes, I'm not here to be a scientist. But typically when we understand moths and rust, it's as things fade, as things diminish, right? As things lose their value, lose their worth, right? The old box of T-shirts in the attic that's been there a couple years, you open it up and like moths fly out, have been eaten at these T-shirts, these clothes. Rust shows up on this object you've left outside and it's got rained on too much, and over time it begins to rust and depreciate. Jesus says the possessions, our possessions, the earthly possessions of this world are going to fade, right? Are going to diminish. And moth and rust is the way Jesus is saying that this is the case. And so what that means for us is when our things diminish and fade and get worse and worse in value, what does that mean we do? We got to get it more. We got to get it again. We got to get another one. It's an endless cycle, Jesus is saying, of having to accomplish and acquire more things because the possessions, our treasures on earth, will fade, will lose value, will diminish. And so we're constantly in a never-ending cycle, a never-ending circle of having to get more. And Jesus says, hey, where thieves break in and steal. Not only moths and rust destroy them, but thieves, he says, break in and steal. Now, this is less likely about Jesus saying literal thieves coming in to literally take our stuff, though that is true and that can happen. But really what Jesus is saying here is thieves break in and steal. He's talking about people who will come into our life and steal our contentment, steal our joy. And they do that because they're on the same path as us, getting all these possessions, and now we bought a new car and it's great, and then we look over the driveway over there, and it's like, oh man, that's a better car than I have. Man, they got a nicer house than I've got. I just bought this new shirt and I come home and I love it, and then I see someone else with a way better shirt. And I'm like, oh, this shirt's terrible. I just loved it 5 minutes ago and now it's worth nothing. People come into our lives, thieves, as Jesus describes them, that are also trying to acquire possessions, and it creates life being like a competition. And life as a competition is no way to live. It's not the kingdom of God. Life is not a competition. Life is a gift. It's not a competition to win. It's a gift that we receive where we can learn to love well. This is the kingdom of God. And when people come in and getting more stuff, we look at our own things and think, that's not good. I don't want that anymore. I want their stuff. We're keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. So people steal our contentment. All right, it's why that 10th commandment is there back in Exodus 20 of do not covet. Be satisfied with what God has given you, and do not look to those that are around you to say, I want their thing and I want their stuff and I want this and that. No, be satisfied, be content with what you have. But if we're always going after worldly possessions, if this is where our priorities are, they're going to fade, they're going to diminish, they're going to get worse. We're going to be in a cycle of having to replace them, and we're going to be trying to keep up with all the people that are around us to get their stuff because it's nicer than our stuff. So Jesus goes on to say, but, verse 20, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. So what are treasures in heaven? Jesus says, lay for yourselves, go after treasures in heaven rather than earth, because the treasures in heaven, moth nor rust do not destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. So the first thing that's important as we wrestle with this is us not reading into the Bible, adding things to that. Sometimes we want to read ourselves into the Bible to add more than is actually there. And Jesus here is not talking about earth and heaven as in the afterlife, things now and things after we die. Laying up for yourselves treasures in heaven, Jesus is talking to an audience where he wants to see them have fullness of life now, today. So what is the difference between treasures on earth and treasures in heaven? I believe treasures in heaven are things that we sow into, things that we give ourselves to. Relationships, the church, those that are less fortunate, the needy. These are things that we give ourselves into, that we sow into. These, in fact, are treasures in heaven. As we sow into them, what's awesome, because Jesus says moths do not break in and steal, or moths and rust do not break in and destroy, thieves do not come in and steal. Because the things that we sow into, these treasures in heaven, they don't diminish. They don't wear out. In fact, quite the opposite. The things that we give ourselves to, that we sow into, in fact, get more valuable. Over time, they get more valuable. I think about my wife and I, who we love each other so much. We have a great relationship. Our relationship now, I would say, is even more valuable than when we started. When we started, we were young, dumb kids that got married, and great, we loved each other. And now as we've grown, right, over the past 12 years, we've experienced, right, moving across the country, buying houses, going through miscarriages, having the joy of children, helping work in ministry. Like, we've been through all of these things, and the relationship that I've sown into her, she's sown into me, is in fact more valuable, more beautiful now and as it was then. And it'll only increase so. The things that we sow into, these are treasures in heaven. My kids, right? The time I spent investing into my kids as they're young, right? That pays dividends as you grow old, right? That when I'm an old man, that they will be there to help care for me, care for us, be there to support us and to bring us joy and come around together on holidays and all of the things that can happen as you invest into those. For me, it's kids, and whether you have kids or not, as you invest into the people that are in your life, that value increases over time as you give to them. It's kind of a paradox of an example, but as we give ourselves away into these things, they tend to gain in value. When we give ourselves into something that's greater than ourselves. Think about giving into the church, right? Maybe for you, for the church, it's like you've been more of a receiver, right? More of, I'm going to come and I like this and this is great, but this is, what am I getting out of it, right? And that's okay if you're there. I don't want you to feel any judgment. At some point along the way, you start to feel like, you know what, I want to sow into the church. I want to give into the church, that I might be a part of something that's greater than myself. And the value that comes from that, it's hard to describe, but the value that comes from that grows and gets bigger, and things you never would have thought. Just this past week, I won't name names, but someone from within the church said, hey, we'd love to come over, hang out with your kids, babysit them so that you can go out on a date. Right? That's not something we're looking for. That's not something we're asking for. It's the church being beautiful, the church being the church, value added to our life in ways we never would have thought. I think about relationships that happen, that people that you've met that you never would have thought about, you never would have connected with them outside of the church, and now you have a friendship, a relationship, business partners, all sorts of things that I've seen bring value to people's life. It's this principle of sowing into something, relationships, the church. Giving to the needy, as God said. Jesus always connects how we love him to how we love those that are less fortunate. The people that need help, that need assistance, the way we give to them, Jesus says, is the way we love Jesus. If you want a test case for yourself, do I love Jesus? Am I loving Jesus well? Ask yourself, how am I loving those that are less fortunate? Loving those that are needy? Jesus says these, the least of these, as he describes them, are great in the kingdom of heaven. And as we give to them, as we love them, it's how we love Jesus. And he says, thieves here do not break in and steal. When we give up that life doesn't have to be a competition, instead of trying to keep up with someone, we can just invite them in. We invite them in. We join in relationship with them. And they don't steal our contentment because we're now happy for them. Mom, I'm glad they got that new car. I'm glad they got that new stuff. And we're not trapped in this cycle of competition, feeling like we have to keep up with those that are around us. It's the difference, Jesus says here, between treasures on earth and treasures in heaven. This is of vital importance to us. Jesus says, verse 21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. This is probably the most famous of the verses we're reading today. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Right? Notice Jesus doesn't say it inversely. He doesn't say it the other way. He doesn't say, where your heart is, there your treasure's going to be. There's where you're going to give your money. No, he says it the other way as to indicate to us where our heart is. Right? We can look around the room at one another, and if we're honest with ourselves, we can see and follow this principle to say where our treasure is, right? Where we spend our time and our money, that's where our heart is. Our heart is not far behind. This is not a principle that I'm making up. It's right here from Jesus' own words. Where our treasure is, there our heart will be also. So if you're like, hey, I look back at my bank account for the last month and I've spent $800 on eating out, which that seems like a lot, but it can go quick. And I dropped a $20 bill into the offering plate for church. I know this is like tense, and I get it. But this is about the principle of our heart. Where we invest our time, where we invest our money, this is where our heart is. How are we giving to those that are in need? How are we following Jesus' commands to give and tithe unto the church, that the church might help in that area of giving to those that are in need and helping with those in the community? Where our treasure is, how we spend our time. Right? If it's like, hey, I'll come to church, once a month. That's pretty good, so they can see me and wave, and here I am. But I'm never going to miss this football game. I'm never going to miss this group, this club. We begin to see where we invest our time and where we invest our money. Jesus says this is where our heart is. And so if you want to know where your heart is, just look at your calendar, look at your bank account. That answers the question for you. I'm not here to judge and condemn you. I'm here to just say what Jesus' words are. As the Holy Spirit speaks and convicts us in different ways, it's indicated our heart is revealed where our treasure is spent. Time and money. And so only you get to answer that question. I'm not here to come knock on your door and say, where are you spending your time and your money? I'm going to tell you what Jesus says. Where your treasure is, time and money, is where your heart is. Jesus goes on to say in verse 22 and 23, he says, he's been talking about the heart, now he shifts up and starts talking about the eye. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body would be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body would be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great the darkness. Jesus is a great rabbi, a great teacher. Yes, we learned from him as Gentiles 2,000 years later, but I don't want us to forget the context. Excuse me. I don't want us to forget the context of the time, of Jesus speaking to a primarily Jewish audience and him himself being a rabbi, teaching these principles that many Jewish people would have understood. And so what Jesus does here is quite brilliant as he pulls, as a great rabbi would, from the Old Testament to help make his point. Jesus connects the eye to the heart, which was a very Jewish understanding. The heart being our soul, who we are, our being, right? The secret place. And the eyes being the window to the soul. What reveals actually what is in the heart. This is all known throughout Jewish literature, both in the Bible and outside of the Bible, the eye and the heart being connected. So Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Then he starts talking about their eyes. And now they would have understood, though we might miss it. But what's beautiful is actually what Jesus says here. If your eye is the eye is the lamp of the body, if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. Jesus pulls this. Let's go back to Deuteronomy all the way to the end of the law, the 5th book of the Bible. Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 9. It says, take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, and you say, the 7th year, the year of release is near. Now there's some context to go into that, which we don't have time for today. They're awaiting part of their Jewish calendar for things that happen on the 7th year. We don't have time to get into all that today. The next part, it says, and your eye look grudgingly. Or another word there for it is evil or bad. On your poor brother, and you give him nothing. And he cried to the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. So he's saying your eye is bad when you have the poor brother that's asking you for help, and you decide you're not going to give to him, and then he cries out against you, and now you're in sin. This is from the law. But what's fascinating, I love this. This is Matthew chapter 20. And I think this is on the same slide, yes. Matthew chapter 20, this is a parable that Jesus tells. All right, now it's about a vineyard worker and the vineyard owner and vineyard workers. Now the vineyard owner is God in the story. And he hires these vineyard workers to come work for him on his vineyard. Some come early in the morning at 6 a.m., Some come at 9 a.m., some come at 12, some come at 3, and some come at 5 p.m. So you have all these workers, some that have worked 12 hours, and some that have worked only 1 hour. He gathers them all together at the end of the day and says, I'm going to pay you a fair wage, and he pays everyone the same thing because that's what they had already agreed upon. Now, the ones that have been there for 12 hours are like, hold up, that ain't fair. I'm upset about this. And in verse 15 here, this is what they say. The vineyard owner, am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me, or do you begrudge my generosity? But here's what's fascinating. I love this. We put it in parentheses below here. If you actually look at the original language, what the literal words are, which would have made sense for us, so they adapted it. The literal words are, or is your eye bad because I am good? That's literally what Jesus says here, drawing from this old Jewish principle. If your eye is bad in this understanding, then you're not helping the poor. Then you're living a life that's greedy and stingy. And like, let me hold tight to what I want. I'm not going to help the poor. Jesus says, the scriptures say, that means your eye is bad. Of course, then if we go to Proverbs, Proverbs written by the great King Solomon, says this in verse 9, chapter 22. Whoever has a bountiful eye, or again, good eye, healthy eye, will be blessed, for he shares his bread with the poor. Whoever has a bountiful eye will be blessed, for he shares his bread with the poor. So Jesus, we might miss it if we don't understand the context, but as he goes and starts talking about your eyes, if you have a good eye, your life is full of light, right? Full of God himself being the light of the world. When you have a good eye, it means your life is full of God, and it's because you're willing to live, right, with open hands, generous, helping those that are less fortunate that come across you in your path. Living a life to say, hey, I've been blessed with it and I want to let go of it to give it to someone else. I don't want to hold it tight and be stingy and greedy. I want to have a good eye in the Jewish understanding to help those that need help, to give bread to the poor and food to those that are hungry, like to help people that need help. This is to have a good eye, which means we're following the Jesus way. Yet Jesus says if you have a bad eye, an evil eye, an unhealthy eye, I know the context might be weird for us, but it's what Jesus is saying. If you have a bad eye, it says your life is full of darkness. And in darkness, you've lost your way. You're going the ways of this world. You're greedy and stingy, and this is, in fact, not how God designed us to live. Now, I know that we all think that we know what's best with our money. I earned it after all, right? I worked hard and got that money. And so we take this, and it's why Jesus talks about money so often, because he goes right at the thing that's most difficult for us. Of like, yeah, I'll be great, I'll go to church, I'll serve people, I'll be nice, but like, don't tell me what to do with my money. So what does Jesus do? He challenges us with our money. This is a good indicator of where our heart is. If we live a life that is stingy and greedy, with closed hands to say, I've been given this money and I'm going to hold it tight, I'm not going to give it to those in my path because I don't know how they're going to spend it. Right? We're good at making excuses. I don't know what they're going to do with it, so I'm going to entrust it to myself. Jesus says, trust God with that. Know that as you live a life with open hands, being helpful to those that are around you, right, being kind and generous, that he is going to continue to entrust you with more. This is a principle of heaven. But if we hold tight to our fists, right, when our fists are closed and God wants to give us more, it's hard for us to actually take it because our fists are closed. When our fists are open, when we live a life with open hands, being willing to give to those that need it, we're ready for God to give us more, to fill us up with whatever that may be. This is the difference between a good eye and a bad eye, as Jesus says. And then he concludes verse 24. He says, no one can serve two masters, for he will either hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Jesus brings it all back together right here. You cannot serve both God and money. And maybe for us, maybe for you, you wouldn't say, I serve money. Right? Maybe you wouldn't say it that way. I worship money. No, you wouldn't say it that way. But what Jesus is getting at is he's revealing what's actually in our heart, the condition of our heart. That is what says where our treasure is, therefore whom we serve, whom we worship. And if we take money and raise it above God, and like, I love God and I want to give to him, but like, don't ask me about this. As long as we have something And for most of us, it's money. But as long as we have something that we hold above God, I love God, but don't talk to me about this. As long as there's that something, whatever it is, Jesus knows it's often money. As long as we hold something above God, that is what we serve. That is whom we worship. This thing. Thus causing us to have idolatry in our hearts, worshiping something greater than God himself. Jesus says the principle is that, hey, if we want to serve God, we cannot also serve money. We cannot hold money as hostage of like, God, come into my life and change my heart, except for this thing over here. It's that one thing for all of us that I know it is. It's why people get tense when churches talk about money. Like I said before, I understand. This is not about me asking you for money. My paycheck's not getting any bigger. It's the smallest in the room and it's going to stay that way. This is you and God. This is between what you have in your heart and what God is speaking to you. To live a life to say, I can hold tight to it or I can let it go. And if we want to entrust him to walk his path that's different than the ways of this world, we let it go. We open our hands and we entrust that God will refill us back up with whatever we need. This is the principle of heaven. We cannot serve both God and money. I pray we would be a people, we would be a church that serves God fully, not with exception. Not I'm going to serve God, but I'm going to serve God except that we would take whatever that is, whether it's money for you or whether it's something else. Jesus uses an example of money, but it could be anything. That we would take whatever it is that's hidden that we don't want to give to God and say, God, even this, I pray you would be Lord of even this. And we'll see how our lives are changed. I've seen it many times. I've seen it in my own life. I pray we would be people that trust and worship God above all things, even our money. Let's pray together.